Welcome back, everybody. We are back for Wildcat Wire Episode 3. I'm Nate Thomas, and I'm joined here by Jake Janisek, and we're going to go straight into this. And our past two podcasts have been about Nebraska versus Colorado, some high school football last week. We're going to go back into some more high school and talk about everything that has happened this past weekend because, man, wasn't it a great weekend for some high school football?
Yeah, it was pretty good. A lot of action. There were a lot of good games, but you can't really top any other game like Millard West versus Millard South.
Yeah, we were both there, and we're both Millard West kids. It was extremely fun. I know we talked a lot about the game last week, but, it's Monday. I think we're going to have to bring it back here and talk a little bit about it. Millard South kind of got off to a slow start, and they fell behind 3-0 early to the Wildcats, but, they picked it up. They led 14-3 at halftime before Dan Sullivan returned a kick 80 yards for a touchdown for Millard West to make it 14-10. And, Millard South just kind of, they put up 13 points, 2 touchdowns in the second half. They're up 27-10 and 27-13. And it just kind of looked like the game was getting out of reach, The Wildcats did have the ball. They went down and scored a touchdown. We both started thinking, well, are they actually going to get back into this game? We kind of have to get a stop here if we want to make it as close. And they did get a touchdown. They got the stop. And kind of bring us through that final drive to tie the game, Jake.
Yeah, well, overall, the game, at the start, TJ Urban, Millard South's quarterback, and they have a lot of running backs, but Isaiah Harris for sure. Isaiah Harris pretty much ripped through the Millard West defense. He had 28 attempts for 204 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a game, and he was really showing he beat up the Millard West defense. And TJ Urban, they're not really a passing team, but he was still able to pass for 99 yards. Isn't too bad. And overall, at the start of the game, Millard South pretty much outplayed us, but we were able to come back. What was our stats?
Yeah, and so, Millard West just had the opportunity at the end. They kept fighting for it, and they ended up tying the game with Tristan Gomez getting a rushing touchdown with 2:06 left in the game. Sam Fetty's extra point was good, and, that final drive was crazy to tie that game.
Yeah. Sam Fetty, he was a really big part, and, just his kicking was, really huge for us. Tristan Gomez, he passed really well. He went for 11 for 20 for 141 yards. But Dallas Beanham wasn't really the big guy. Caden Oderman kind of stepped up in this game.
Yeah, he did. He came up with some big catches there in the fourth quarter. I know he had that long one to set up that first touchdown on the fourth quarter to pull the game into 7. And he played a crucial part that whole game. And it just kind of looked like Millard South was putting safeties over the top for Beanham, just kind of trying to limit what he could do. And that allowed Gomez to start looking towards Caden Oderman, some of these other receivers to kind of bring them into the game.
Yeah, and also Jackson Wright, he rushed pretty well. We were talking about kind of in the pregame that, for Millard West to really win games, they got to get a good game from Jackson Wright. They got to get some good quarterback play. We saw a little bit of Nate Glantz in there, but overall, then Tristan Gomez played a big part in the win. And basically, honestly, the defense was kind of getting beat up, but they kind of got some momentum back on their side. They really stepped up big. Braden Cundiff, he had a really good game. And honestly, probably the biggest play was that when Tristan Gomez fumbled it about the 2-yard line and Andrew Willenberg recovered it. That was a huge play because we never had a chance in the game if he didn't recover it.
Yeah, and so the play that you're bringing up was, I believe it was 1st and goal from the 3-yard line. Tristan Gomez kept a read option, and he got to about the 1.5-yard line before he had the ball poked out. It was rolling around on the ground for quite a bit, and everyone was just holding their breath. And we finally saw the ref signal second down, and everyone just let out a big relief. Andrew Wollenberg, the senior offensive lineman, was able to get back on that ball and what a big play that was. Because the very next play, Tristan Gomez ran it into the end zone.
Yeah, it was a pretty big play, and pretty much Miller West has still like a lot to learn from this game because they did make a lot of mistakes, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, that defensive line played actually very well for the Wildcats, but everything outside of that, I just felt like it could have been a bit stronger. They were putting a lot of pressure on TJ Urban when he dropped back to throw. They really were like keeping their contain on the inside. It was just Isaiah Harris was so quick getting around the outside that the linebackers, the corners, the safeties just really weren't there. They were expecting everything to go up the middle, but everything just kept getting bounced outside, and he's able to pick up 9-10 yards of carry.
Yeah, because before we didn't really talk about Isaiah Harris that much. He didn't really play a huge part for Miller South because you said they have a lot of running backs.
Yeah, they rotate in like 3-4 running backs. I know we saw that at the end with Isaiah Jackson. He played a little bit in that game, but I mean, it wasn't like they had one good like core running back that they choose to go with every single play until this game, it seemed like.
Yeah.
And I think the coaching staff over at Millard South kind of diagnosed that as a weakness. Isaiah Harris can be a strong weapon for us in this game. Yeah, but I mean, continuing on with what happened in that game, actually, I think it was Jackson Wright scored. With 2:06 left, the Wildcats tied it, and Millard South got the ball back, and they picked up a couple of third down conversions, and they attempted a field goal with 6 seconds left. The Wildcats blocked it, but the time didn't start. So there was a bunch of controversy on whether or not there would be a re-kick or, I mean, if they're just going to roll with it.
Because they kicked it on third down, and Coach Pete was going crazy on that.
Yeah, and I mean, everyone was really confused on what was actually going to happen, what they were going to call. But finally, they just said, all right, that's going to be the end of regulation, and we were headed into overtime. And both teams got their starts at the 10-yard line.
Yeah.
And they had 4 downs to get 10 yards into the end zone. And
Miller West started out with it, and basically took them. It was like third down and 3 where they finally punched it in.
Yeah, so Tristan Gomez kept another read option and took it into the end zone to give the Wildcats a 7-point lead on offense first. And the defense came out and played very well. And TJ Urban scrambled on 4th down and was sacked by Braden Cundiff to actually end the game, and the Wildcats getting the win. And I mean, everyone was going crazy. All the players were onto the field, and I actually heard from a Millard South student saying, like, yeah, if we actually made that field goal, we would have all been on the field. Nobody was stopping us. And so it was just kind of a big game for both teams. Both teams wanted to win it so badly, and Millard West was just able to come on top of that game.
Yeah, it was just the Battle of Q Street. Always a big rivalry year in, year out, even though Millard West has kind of dominated the series. But it's always been like it's been really good overall. When we were there, like the Millard South student section was like yelling at us because we were really quiet because we thought the game was over, 27-13. Some people were leaving.
Yeah, that student section was about half empty by the time, we got to overtime. But it was a great all-around game. I think we're going to move on so we can start talking about some of these other games. But, I mean, we talked about Elkhorn South against Bellevue West being a great game. And Elkhorn South popped out to an early 3-0 lead. But they would never score again in that game. And Bellevue West ended up pulling away 38-3. And, I mean, like we said, this Bellevue West offense can put up a lot of points and is very strong.
Yeah, Bellevue West, they've been one of the more impressive offensive I've seen in a while. Just their ability to score and just bring up the scoreboard. Like we said, they scored 81 points on Bellevue East. Like, this team is no joke, really.
No, they're not. They've always had that strong offense, but the defense just hasn't, kept up with it. But, I mean, this year you look at, some of these defensive performances they have had. I know Lincoln High has great offense as well. They gave up 43 points in that game, but they ended up putting up 49 in overtime. And they ended up putting up 81 points, 51, and 38 in their other few games, Bellevue West. And, I mean, this is just such a strong offense. I mean, that puts them at 219 points so far this season, only giving up 68, with a large majority of that coming up against Lincoln High.
Yeah, I think they might go undefeated the rest of the year. They don't really have a huge challenge in them.
You look at this Pius team, they don't get enough. Lincoln Pius does not get enough credit for what they truly are. They have played a lot of good teams so far this year. They ended up beating Omaha North last year, and they're 2-2 so far this year. Their pair of wins have come from Gretna and Lincoln East, but their losses to Lincoln High and Millard South are combined 6 points, 3 in each. And so, I mean, if they can hold this Bellevue West offense to probably under 40 points, they might have a strong chance at this game. But, I mean, that Bellevue West team is so good. Mm-hmm. And we've seen a lot of people talking about, yeah, we really want to see them play a really good team here in the second half of the season. But we'll get that when they play Omaha North in just a few weeks. But we'll have to see. Speaking of Omaha North, we're going to move over to that game where they played Burke, and they just got beat again. Burke is such a good team, and we've talked about that over the past few weeks. And, I mean, it's just kind of unbelievable to see how good this Burke team is.
Yeah, for high school.
I know. We saw
pretty good with like Nick Henrich and Chris Hickman. You know, they're pretty good. They're both really good players that are going to play D1.
Yeah,
like we saw Chris Hickman, he committed to Nebraska just on Saturday. So, you know, there's some really good players, and they're going to be hard to stop.
Yeah, like you said, Hickman ended up committing over the weekend to Nebraska. Nick has been committed to the Cornhuskers since, I believe it was the middle of July. But they ended up winning by a score of 41-24 over Omaha North. And, I mean, that game was never really close. Mm-hmm. Like, Omaha North kind of kept up with them like we saw with Millard West do for a little bit in that game. But Burke just pulled away strong in that second quarter. They put up 21 points, and they had a total of 28 at halftime. The score is 28-3. I mean, at that point, you're almost looking at, like, really, do we have to go much more in this game? Mm-hmm. James Burks for Burke had 192 yards on 19 carries, and they kind of held Xander Gray in check with only 94.
Uh-huh. And 94 is usually good, but like for Xander Gray, if you can hold him to that, that's pretty good because he can almost get 200 yards a game on you.
Yeah, he hung 230 up on Millard West and Creighton Prep in 2 of the 3 games so far this year. And Omaha North is still a good team. I think you can't count them out just yet. You know, they've had a tough schedule so far. They played 3 top 10 teams, 2 inside the top 4 now. And, I mean, you still can't count them out to win a state title. And, I mean, I think they'll get 2 more things that I think we want to talk about here. And that's going to be Scott and York. And, I mean, that was the top game. That might have been the top game in the state this past week. And it was neck and neck almost the whole entire game. York almost had a chance at the end. They were just quite short. And Tyson Gordon for Scott was able to come up with the game-winning interception and seal the 37 victory in favor of the Skyhawks. But, I mean, that's a rematch of what we saw in the state championship game last November, where York just beat up on the Skyhawks.
Yeah, which doesn't really usually happen because, you know, it seems like Scott in Class B is just always there at the top.
Yeah, they're just making it back to state championship years in, years out. if they're not there, they're still in great contention to be there. We saw Aurora a couple of years ago there with their star quarterback, but, they've got a new one under center. And Brady Sherman, we talked a lot about him last week. He had 1,236 yards coming into this week. He put up close to another 390 that he had again this week.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. But he's just been on fire for them.
Yeah, he has been a really good player. I'm surprised he hasn't got a lot of attention. I feel he's not really getting enough attention because you don't see a lot of people covering him that much. I think when he starts getting down to the end of this season, he's pushing almost 4,000 yards. He'll definitely be getting some attention, maybe even some D1 offers.
Yeah, he's currently committed to play basketball at South Dakota State, where I think it's been about a year since he announced his commitment there. And, that just might be why some teams are kind of shying off from him. But there's probably a lot of interest. He's 6'6", 165. He's such a big guy standing there in the pocket. And he's able to roll out. He's a left-handed gunslinger, can throw it downfield. He can get some big chunk plays. His average is like 13, 14 yards a play. Just because he throws it so much. And his receivers he's spreading the wealth to everybody. It's not like he's got, one guy he's throwing to all the way down the field, every other play. And so, once you kind of have a team built around him, he's able to succeed like he has. I know 3 interceptions are kind of a warning, kind of like shy away. But, this is a C1 team, and they're going up against the number 7 Class B team in Grand Island Northwest. They ended up pulling away a victory, a strong fourth quarter. And so, it was a great Friday night.
Yeah.
For high school football.
Yeah. Let's kind of switch it here. Getting to the end of the podcast, let's kind of preview the game between Millard West and Bryan. What are you kind of looking forward to in that ball game?
Well, it's just kind of I want to say it's a trap game for Millard West. You're coming off a huge win against your rivals in overtime against Millard South, and Bryan just hasn't quite been there for the past few years. I know they got their first 2 wins in 3 or 4 years last year, and they had one earlier this year, but they're still off the pace of everybody. And so these Millard West kids are just kind of it's Omaha Bryan. We can kind of we don't have to play as well. But I know Coach Pete said after the game this past week, we made a lot of mistakes. We've got a lot of stuff that we want to fix here in practice this week. And we got to get ready for this Omaha Bryan game. We don't try in this, and you could be coming out with your second loss of the year. Their next game is up against Kearney on the 28th. They got to travel 2.5 hours to get there. And they're not going to be looking too much at this Bryan game, but they still got to come up and play.
Yeah, Bryan, they've kind of struggled in the past years, but you're right. You just can't look past a football team. And Bryan, they might be able to sneak up on you, but I think the Wildcats will win and kind of get some momentum kind of going on to Kearney, which will be a huge game for the Wildcats.
Yeah, their next 2 games after Bryan will be at Kearney and at home against Grand Island. And Grand Island won again this week. They're 4-0 on the season. They're ranked 3rd here in Class A, and nobody really knew about them. Just kind of like Kearney a year ago. Kearney's out west. They don't play anybody. And, they put together a great season. They ended up almost winning a state championship. But, this Grand Island team, they're going to come roaring into Omaha in a few weeks. They could be 4-1, 5-0 against a good team in Millard West. And, it'll be a great game. I know we'll both be there. There's a lot of media that's going to be there. It's going to be a packed house at Buell Stadium. But we're going to focus on these 2 weeks, and I think that's what a lot of the players are going to say. And, I think we're coming down to the end of it here.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you'd like to add here?
No, just it's still going to be an exciting season. Still got a lot to look forward to, and it should be a good one. I think that's going to do it here for us at the Wildcat Wire. I'm Jake Janisak.
And I'm Nate Thomas, and we'll catch you next time, everybody.